Clarkson's Farm star and Sun columnist Jeremy said he booked a coach to travel to London to protest alongside agricultural workers from the Cotswolds.
They brought over 100 tractors. One by one, they left in convoy, British flags flying high.
Keir Starmer just got destroyed by Jeremy Clarkson over Labour's inheritance tax blunder, and farmers aren't holding back either. With one brutal takedown, Clarkson managed to highlight just how disastrous this policy would be for rural communities, and he didn't hold back. Farmers across the UK are calling out the 20% inheritance tax on farms worth over 1 million, saying it's practically a death sentence for their livelihoods.
If you own a farm or land, you have an additional £1 million inheritance tax than anyone else.
Seriously, could Labour have picked a worse group to anger? Farmers are seething, and they're not staying quiet about how this tax could destroy their future. And if Labour doesn't backtrack fast, they could face a revolt not just in Parliament, but on the very farms that feed the nation.
One day, all this will be Rachel Reeves. What, the curtains? Yep, she'll have those as well.
So our fearless man Jeremy Clarkson, the outspoken defender of all things countryside, has taken a verbal combine harvester to Labour's latest farming policies, leaving Starmer's leadership looking about as steady as a cow on roller skates. It's not just a critique, it's a full-scale demolition, exposing Labour's policies for what they truly are, a threat to the very backbone of Britain's agricultural heritage. And it's got everyone asking, why is Labour risking the food on our plates and the livelihood of our farmers?
To beef and lamb that tastes great.
It's all produced by a farmer.
So here's our message to Sir Keir Starmer. British farmers and growers are up in arms.
Working to save the future of our family farms.
Labour's latest brainwave, a 20% inheritance tax on farms valued over 1 million, might sound harmless if you're nestled in a city apartment surrounded by takeout menus. But in the countryside, this is less of a tax and more of a death sentence for family farms. Let's not pretend this is a niche problem. A staggering 70% of farms fall into the crosshairs of this policy. For these families, their farms aren't just plots of land, they're legacies, livelihoods, and the literal fruits of generations of backbreaking labour.
Clarkson's Farm star and Sun columnist Jeremy said he booked a coach to travel to London to protest alongside agricultural workers from the Cotswolds. And it seems that if you're from Just Stop Oil or protesting about Gaza, you can do whatever you want. But farmers are treated differently by a government that is basically waging an all-out war on the countryside. He said, "We wanted to protest in a dignified and sensible way, which was why I'd booked the coach rather than causing disruption with tractors and farming vehicles." And Jeremy, who owns Diddley Squat Farm in Chadwington, Oxfordshire, added, "I'm in a fortunate position, but I feel desperately sorry for other farmers who are very angry and anxious about the future."
Spending decades waking up at dawn, battling unpredictable weather, and sacrificing holidays to keep your farm afloat, only to find out that when you're gone, your children might have to sell it just to pay the tax bill. That's the bleak reality staring down countless farmers. Clarkson didn't need to exaggerate when he called this policy a bulldozer aimed at the countryside. It's no hyperbole. Generational farms are at risk of becoming ghost stories, replaced by corporate monocultures or housing developments. The very essence of British farming is being tossed aside for short-term fiscal gains.
So would you invite Keir to your pub, Keir Starmer, the Prime Minister?
No, he's banned. He's the first person to be banned. He's actually on a board in the hall. He's banned.
When you think of farming champions, Jeremy Clarkson might not be the first name to come to mind. After all, this is the man who made a career out of pushing cars to their limits and insulting co-hosts with abandon. But Clarkson's transition from petrolhead to farmer-in-chief has been nothing short of remarkable. His Amazon Prime series, Clarkson's Farm, gave viewers an unfiltered look at the challenges, triumphs, and sheer absurdity of running a farm in modern Britain. And if one thing became clear, it's that Clarkson isn't just dabbling, he cares deeply about the farming community and the struggles they face.
Is that because you essentially misled the country during the election and you've raised taxes in a way that no one was expecting?
We've had to do the responsible thing, which is to stabilise the economy, to make sure we're putting investment in for the future. That's what matters to me. And the outcomes are what matters. 40,000 extra appointments each and every week to bring the waiting list.
Unlike many celebrities who jump on causes for PR brownie points, Clarkson isn't just tweeting outrage or penning a scathing column, although, let's be honest, he's great at that too. No, he's actually getting his boots muddy. When Labour's tax policy dropped, Clarkson didn't stay on the sidelines. He booked a coach, gathered a group of farmers, and headed straight to London. This wasn't a disruptive, glue yourself to the pavement kind of protest. It was dignified, measured, and respectful, qualities often missing from modern demonstrations. Clarkson's message was clear. We're here to talk, not to obstruct. And that quiet determination carried more weight than 1,000 megaphones ever could.
You know who's been interesting this morning? It's a very wise man, Jeremy Clarkson. Well, Jeremy Clarkson has said, I'm surrounded by farmers and plasterers and brickies. And he says, I therefore suggest that both he and his friends at the BBC calm down the rhetoric or we could be heading for some serious trouble. And he's absolutely right.
Clarkson didn't mince his words when it came to Keir Starmer. His critique was as blunt as a farmhand's shovel. Labour's policies amount to an all-out war on the countryside. And it's hard to argue otherwise. Let's rewind to the National Farmers Union, NFU conference earlier this year, where Starmer stood before a room full of farmers and promised to protect family farms. It was all smiles, handshakes, and carefully rehearsed sound bites about sustainability and heritage. But now, Labour's latest policy is a direct betrayal of that pledge. Clarkson didn't just call Starmer out, he exposed the gaping chasm between Labour's promises and their actions.
And indeed, 73% of farms last year would not pay any inheritance tax at all, even after our changes. And after that next £1 million.
The problem with Labour's policy isn't just the tax itself, it's the hypocrisy. Farmers were led to believe they had an ally in Starmer, someone who understood the vital role they play in the economy and the environment. Instead, they got a leader whose actions suggest he's more interested in appeasing urban voters than safeguarding rural communities. Clarkson's scorn wasn't just about the policy, it was about the dishonesty. And if there's one thing farmers can't stand, it's someone who talks out of both sides of their mouth.
Everybody else will pay, and you can pay that inheritance tax over a 10-year period in a way that no one else is able to. So I think we've got the right balance there. We did need to raise taxes to fill the black hole, to put our public finances.
Let's talk about food. It's easy to take it for granted, isn't it? You walk into a supermarket, grab what you need, and head home without a second thought about where it all comes from. But here's the truth. Without farmers, there is no food. It's not a dramatic exaggeration, it's a fact. The slogan, no farmers, no food, no future, isn't just catchy, it's a cold, hard warning.
Farmers still get a privileged status for their farms, and I think that may or may not be right. I'm personally in favour of doing to farmers who want to go on the streets, we can do to them what Margaret Thatcher did to the miners.
So just to be clear, Johnny, you would, beat them up?
No, close them. I mean, this is an industry we could do without.
Okay, all right, so this got weird. So you would do to farmers what Margaret Thatcher did to miners, which was, she used very heavy-handed police tactics, followed by what? Putting them out of business.
If people are so upset that they want to go on the streets and spray slurry on them, then we don't need the small farmers.
Labour's tax policy doesn't just threaten individual farmers, it jeopardises the entire food supply chain. When family farms disappear, the knock-on effects ripple far beyond the countryside. Locally grown produce gets replaced by imports, prices soar, and food inflation becomes an even bigger burden on already struggling families. It's not just a rural problem, it's a national crisis in the making. Farmers aren't just fighting for their livelihoods, they're fighting for everyone who eats. And in case you missed it, that includes every single one of us. Clarkson's protests have hammered home this point. This isn't about protecting a niche group of people, it's about safeguarding the food security of an entire nation.
John McTernan, a former aide to Tony Blair, of course the Labour Prime Minister, says your party wants to do to the farmers what Thatcher did to the miners. It's an industry we can do without. Is that what you think about farming?
No, I totally disagree. I'm absolutely committed to supporting our farmers. I said that before the election, and I say it after the election. That is why in our budget last week I was very pleased that we're investing £5 billion of our budget over the next 2 years into farming. That is really important for our farmers, and I will do everything I can to support them.
Here's where things get even more baffling. The very people Labour claims to be helping, the working class, are the ones most likely to suffer from this policy. Let's break it down. By targeting farms with a blanket inheritance tax, Labour disproportionately impacts smaller family-run operations. These aren't the billionaires sipping champagne on sprawling estates. They're hard-working families whose entire income comes from their land. Meanwhile, the ultra-wealthy landowners with diversified income streams, they'll barely feel a pinch. Clarkson pointed out this glaring inequality with his usual wit and bite, describing the policy as a classic example of top-down economics gone wrong. Instead of taxing wealth where it's concentrated, Labour is squeezing the very people who are already struggling to make ends meet, and the consequences don't stop at the farm gate. Fewer farms mean less competition, and less competition means higher prices. It's economics 101, but somehow the policymakers drafting these plans seem to have missed that lecture. This isn't just about balance sheets and policy papers, it's about people. Farmers aren't faceless entities, they're families with deep roots in their land and communities. They're the ones who wake up before dawn to feed the nation and go to bed worrying about whether they'll be able to keep their farms afloat. And now, thanks to Labour's tax plan, many of them are facing an impossible choice: sell their land or sink under the weight of inheritance taxes.
Lots of family farms very upset, saying that some of them will go out of business as a result of the changes to inheritance tax. You're not going to budge on that, are you?
This government had to make a number of difficult decisions in the budget last month to put our public finances back on a firm footing. Difficult decisions on spending, on welfare and on tax. But I would just say this around agricultural property relief. If you're a couple who own a farm, including a home on the farm, you can pass on £3 million tax-free to the next generation.
Clarkson didn't shy away from highlighting this human cost. For him, this isn't just a political issue, it's a deeply personal one. He's seen firsthand the challenges farmers face, from unpredictable weather to relentless market pressures. This tax, he argues, is the final straw for many. It's a policy that values spreadsheets over people, and Clarkson isn't afraid to call it out for what it is: a disaster waiting to happen. If Labour thought farmers would roll over and accept this policy, they've clearly never met a farmer. Clarkson's call to action has ignited a fire in the countryside, sparking protests and grassroots campaigns across the nation. From week-long strikes to plans for blocking produce deliveries, farmers are making it clear that they won't go down without a fight. And it's not just farmers who are speaking out. Rural communities, local businesses, and even urban supporters are rallying behind the cause. Clarkson has become a lightning rod for this movement, using his platform to amplify the voices of those who often go unheard. His message is simple but powerful. This isn't just about farms, it's about fairness, justice, and the future of the nation.
And certainly farmers must feel that they have been readily attacked by Starmer in the budget.
Yeah, I think what's really frustrating is that he went to the NFU conference in February and said he'd protect family farms. He's not just taxing us as a farming community. I'll tell you what he's doing. He is taxing the poorer people in society, because this is only going to cause more food inflation, more hikes in food costs, and who are going to suffer? The poorer people in society.
You might be sitting in a city far removed from the rolling fields of the countryside, thinking this issue doesn't affect you. But here's the harsh reality. When farms struggle, we all feel the impact. Food prices don't exist in isolation. The fewer farms we have, the more reliant we become on imports, and the less control we have over what we eat and how much it costs. Labour's tax might seem like a rural issue, but its consequences will ripple through every corner of the UK. Clarkson's critique isn't just a rallying cry for farmers, it's a warning to the entire nation. If we don't protect our farmers, we're not just losing a piece of our heritage, we're putting our food security and economic stability at risk. And that's a gamble no one can afford to take. Jeremy Clarkson's takedown of Labour's farming policies is more than just a clash of personalities, it's a battle for the soul of British agriculture. In a world increasingly disconnected from where our food comes from, Clarkson's outspoken defence of farmers is a much-needed wake-up call. Whether or not Keir Starmer listens remains to be seen, but one thing is certain: Clarkson isn't backing down, and neither are the farmers he's fighting for.